Subsurface Circular is a game by Mike Bithell, perhaps better known for his highly regarded indie opus Thomas Was Alone. That was a game that won plaudits for delivering an emotionally resonant experience for players in spite of its absurdly simple premise. Bithell himself has been known to describe it matter-of-factly as a game about rectangles and jumping, which sells it short to be honest. But as elevator pitches go, that makes it sound like a thriller minute compared to this 2017 offering. Maybe the best way to describe Subsurface Circular is to say that it's an interactive mystery with a science fiction leaning, built around an extremely simple user interface. It casts you as a robot detective assigned to patrol an underground railway network, a task you won't even leave your seat to accomplish. Instead, you'll remain in the carriage and investigate suspicious events simply by talking to the other robotic passengers who board the carriage at the various stops along your route. And that's pretty much all there is to it. What Mike Bithell has created here is a short narratively driven game built around the idea that its plot is advanced solely through conversation. During early exchanges with other passengers, you'll pick up clues and talking points to use later in discussion with the other robots you'll meet. Those discussions are carried out via a multiple choice system of dialogue responses, occasionally supplemented by what the game calls focus points, specific points of discussion that you unlock by talking with certain characters and then pursue as the opportunity arises. You'll be given set objectives which guide you down certain vital lines of inquiry, but it's up to you to work out who you need to approach and what you need to say to move things forward. It's a novel approach to packaging a narrative, and it works very smoothly. There's certainly no fat on it, and in a way, that's where my reservations with it lie. Subsurface Circular is the kind of game where it honestly pays to know what you're getting into before you part with your hard-earned, or else you could easily feel shortchanged. It's intentionally designed to be something you can start and finish in a single sitting, taking around 2 hours to complete, and despite the attractive presentation, there's really not a lot to it in terms of actual gameplay. Even at its most challenging, it only really presents you with logic problems that are dependent on your deductive and reasoning skills to solve, but I'd hesitate to call that a criticism. I mean, right there you've got something that should be at the very heart of good game design, and I know people who lap this kind of thing up. Not everybody wants to commit to massive AAA games and the investment of time and attention they require, after all. Personally though, I'd have preferred a bit more interactivity and some variety in terms of what you can actually do in-game. Subsurface Circular has been described elsewhere as a modern take on text adventure games, such as you used to see for home computers in the early 80s, and that's a fair comparison, although I can recall playing those kinds of games on my ZX Spectrum as a kid, and feeling a little more involved with the experience than I did here. That's probably something to do with having to manually input commands, or, inevitably, a string of profanities when I couldn't work out how to make the computer understand me. If you played those games as a kid, you know what I mean. Don't try to tell me you never did that. All credit where it's due though, Mike Bithell has come up with a novel concept, and not only committed to it, but executed it very tidily. It's certainly in keeping with the direction he seems determined to move in, whereby game mechanics are pared right down to basics in efforts to eke the maximum effect from them. The story that's being told here is what's most important, and nothing, barring a couple of genuinely tricky puzzles toward the end, threatens to stand in its way. If I'm honest, the thought of playing a game where you spend the entire duration making conversation with passengers on a train didn't exactly ignite in me a great need to play it the instant I'd downloaded it. But when I did get around to it, I was pleasantly surprised to find a story that advances at a good enough pace and throws out enough interesting ideas to overcome what felt to me like an initially dull setup. It took a while to win me over, but the further in I got, the more it commanded my attention, before building to a memorable and unsettling finale. It's intelligent stuff, and the constraints of its premise put me in mind of an Alfred Hitchcock movie of all things, rather than classic science fiction. Although you can definitely see the story has roots that extend back to that as well. It's very smartly conceived on that front. I guess the real question though is whether I'd recommend Subsurface Circular as a pickup for Nintendo Switch owners, and that's a tricky one to answer with confidence. It's probably worth mentioning that, although this is the Switch version I'm reviewing, you can pick it up on Steam for PC as well, and you really don't get anything significant over the PC version here, besides being able to play it on the go in handheld mode. About the most exciting platform-specific feature here is that the viewpoint shifts around a bit in response to the Joy-Con's gyroscopic controls. That's a neat effect that sells the idea of being on a moving train. But really, that's all it is. As for the game itself, well, I enjoyed the time I spent with it, certainly. But beyond unlocking the developer's commentary after a first playthrough, and maybe playing a game to explore different dialogue options, I don't think there's much replay value here. The game has two possible conclusions, but really, as big as the story blows up to be, and as dramatic as the player's choice is that its ending hinges on, you don't get anything as exciting as a different closing cinematic once you've made it. The game just ends and rolls its credits, which I think is a bit of an anticlimax. And it makes me wonder if Mike Bithell might want to re-evaluate what he offers folks who pick up his games in terms of reward for the effort they take to complete. If you need some kind of visceral payoff for finishing your games, you might want to look elsewhere. It's better to come to this one for the journey it'll take you on. As much as I hate to end a review with such a cop-out statement of the obvious, Subsurface Circular isn't going to be for everyone. But it is interesting, and manages to wrap up without feeling like it was too slight for its own good. I personally always find it intriguing to see how developers explore different methods of storytelling in video games, and even if this one doesn't feel revolutionary in the way it's executed, it's well written, and certainly engaging while it lasts.